The first reason, I suppose, is because he is a genuine working class guy, and for better or worse. And second, I haven't seen anyone anywhere who's been more unwavering in his commitment to reveal the atrocities of the grooming gangs in the UK, which are organized patterns of activity that are very pervasive, that are so terrible that it's almost impossible to talk about them without sounding like a conspiracy theorist. So now, there's no doubt that there are many things that you could accuse Tommy Robinson of, and many of those he would admit to. But to me, and also to my wife, fair enough. But the fact that he's pointed his finger at something that seriously needs to be attended to and has paid a major price for it is also not ignorable. It's like, do we expect someone who's brave enough to do that to also be perfect in every regard? That's asking a bit much, given that there's many people who, in principle, have moral characters much more unsullied than Tommy Robinson, who are cowering in silence constantly in the face of this absolute brutal atrocity. And so we interviewed him. And what did I think of Tommy? He's very articulate. He can certainly make a case for himself. And then I thought it was up to the audience to listen and to make their own judgment. Now, that was before the recent march that Robinson and his crew organized in London, which, in my estimation, I'm interested in your perspective, went as peacefully and well as the protests in Ottawa, which it was modeled after. And so I thought his crew handled that extraordinarily well. Now, in the aftermath of those protests, of course, all sorts of chaotic hell has broken loose. And, why don't you are much closer to such things than me? I mean...
Well, hello there. Today we have an interesting conversation between Jordan Peterson, as you can see, and Douglas Murray, and they are talking about Tommy Robinson. And specifically, as Jordan Peterson just mentioned, Tommy Robinson, who is, by the way, in case you don't know, an activist, sort of a nationalist, pro-English, pro-British nationalist in the UK, and dissident, I would call him too. In the wake of some a tragic stabbing a couple months ago, where an immigrant child, or a child of immigrants, I should put it, from Rwanda, stabbed and killed 3 young girls, and injured several others seriously at a dance class, which in turn unleashed several days of violent riots in the UK. And those riots were put down very harshly by the authorities. Now, so Tommy Robinson was in some way a part of those demonstrations. And Douglas Murray now, Tommy Robinson is very working class, if you don't know who he is. He's from Luton in England, a very diverse place, which has been completely changed over the last few decades through mass migration. Douglas Murray is also a type of, not exactly a dissident, but he is, I don't know if he's an academic per se, but he's a very well-spoken man who's written several books about the effects of mass migration, especially mass migration from the Islamic world in Europe, or to Europe. So these two are talking about Tommy Robinson. It should be an interesting conversation. Let's see what they have to say.
Being a denizen of that country, I'm looking from outside, trying to make sense out of it. But my sense at the moment is that the UK is somewhat of a tinderbox. And so...
Yes, and I wish it hadn't been so predictable. I wrote about this so many years, warned about it. The Strange Death of Europe was largely my last-ditch attempt to warn my own society of birth and other Western countries not to go down the path that they were precisely going down. And as a former government minister said in the Times a couple of days ago, the thing about my predictions on that was that I made them not with any glee, but in a spirit of deep lamentation about what was about to happen to my society. And as I see it, Tommy Robinson's a very interesting example of this whole thing. But let me just explain how I see it. This whole conflagration of recent days it started when a 17-year-old went into a Taylor Swift dance class a couple of weeks ago now and started hacking at young girls with a knife. Killed 3 girls, 9-year-olds, thereabouts, wounded many others. And the news of that came out, and a very typical modern British, modern European, modern Western thing happened, which was that in the aftermath, people started to suspect something was being kept from them. Now, wiser heads would wait, but not everyone's a wise head after 9-year-old girls are bludgeoned to death, stabbed to death. So false information went out online saying that the attacker was had arrived on one of the many boats of illegal migrants that come across the English Channel every week. That was untrue. In fact, he was the son of immigrants from Rwanda. But people started to sense that there was a cover-up of some kind, or at least the news was being managed. The police in Britain seem always to think they're being very clever at this, and it's always seemed to me that they exacerbate every problem they put their mind to.
Yes. The problem was, if anybody followed this story, was much like Douglas Murray just said, it became immediately clear that, yes, there was a popular response, or a people's uprising in response to this horrible killing, these horrible killings. And the government and the police would debunk so-called conspiracy theories about the killer. You know, somebody said, oh, he's an illegal alien who shouldn't even be in our country. No, it's true. The kid who did it was not an illegal. He was the son of Rwandan immigrants. And, you know, oh, he's a Muslim. These bloody Muslims shouldn't be in our country. And, yes, his parents weren't Muslim, or he wasn't Muslim either. He was from, as far as we know, I think, his parents were from Rwanda. You know, it's not a Muslim country or an Islamic country. But that's just, you know, that's just a sort of what's the word? Diverting attention away from the point. The reason people were protesting and rioting is not because of the specifics of whether he was a Muslim or illegal or this or that. The fact is, they are just fed up with the overwhelming demographic shift, which leads to social and cultural shifts within their country within the space of just a few decades. That is what they are reacting to. And yes, specifically in this case, somebody who, in their view, shouldn't even be in the country, whether legally or illegally or whatever, it's irrelevant. They are reacting to that. They're reacting to the years and decades of this demographic replacement of their once European British country. That's what they're reacting to. And of course, you get in trouble for saying things like that these days. But I think the good news is there are people like Tommy Robinson, people like Douglas Murray, who will go out on a limb, in the case of Tommy Robinson, who will go to prison for saying these things and for getting in trouble. And I think more and more people are also just willing to say these things out loud, as you should, as everybody should, because if European countries are meant to be European, they're European for a reason. Rwanda, you wouldn't want mass migration of Europeans to Rwanda, for example. It would change the very texture of their society, which would not be right. And vice versa in the other direction. You don't want mass migration from Africa or India or Asia to European countries because it changes them from European into non-European.
They insisted that the young man was originally from Cardiff, capital of Wales, and people just sense there's something they're holding from us.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt again. That was exactly what they said. They said, "Oh, no, he's not a foreigner. He's from Cardiff. He was born in Cardiff." Yeah, he was born in Cardiff, in Wales, part of the UK. But he's Rwandan.
Sure enough. Anyway, the point is that very unpleasant, ugly, and again, evil forces can get unleashed at such a time, the spirit of revenge. And some protests started peacefully at first, then some violent. A mosque was targeted nearby, and then violence started to spread out to other towns. Then Muslim communities started to arm up, in some cases literally, with people turning up with knives to defend their areas. This is all, and maybe it'll die down by the time this podcast has gone out, or maybe it'll get a lot worse. But
Please forgive my interruption again, but there were, in the wake of these violent protests, there were police in some of the northern cities, or some of the cities of the UK where there's big Muslim populations. I saw some sort of press conferences where a police officer, two different police officers were talking, and they began their press conference by saying, "Salam alaikum," like saying hello in Arabic, as they began the press conference. Is this normal in England for the police to speak Arabic when they're giving a press conference? Doesn't matter if their entire audience is made up of people from Arabic-speaking countries. Why would they do that?
one thing you can say with absolute certainty is it's not going to go away, because all of this is the consequence of what I call the problem of primary and secondary problems. The primary problem in the UK, as in Europe in recent years, has been the total unwillingness of the political and other classes in the UK to address deep, deep concerns of the public. And when people said in recent days, how could anyone leap to such a conclusion that the attacker would be, and you go, because everyone's seen this before. You know, people don't actually forget very fast, the media class may, but they don't forget very fast that it's only 7 years ago that the son of Libyan migrants to the UK went and detonated a suicide bomb at an Ariana Grande concert in Manchester. They don't forget fast that 3 people who had no right to be in the UK, including one whose asylum claim had been rejected, but who was nowhere near being deported, went across London Bridge in 2017, hacking at the throats of passers-by and shouting Allahu Akbar. They don't forget that, they notice it. But the British government and others have had this very, very clear policy that they don't really know what to do to tackle that. They don't know what to do really to tackle the grooming gangs issue. There was another set of prosecutions the other day, and another case is coming to court in the coming weeks. You could say, well, they clearly do, they're using the law, but a lot of the public say, well, not fast enough and not really. There's an awful lot of rapists still walking around with girls who are their victims in the same towns. And the government knows that.
If you don't know what he's talking about the grooming gang scandal affecting in certain towns in the north of England, where these gangs of Pakistani men were basically pimping out and raping young white English girls. I mean, teenagers, basically. Look it up. Wikipedia, I don't know what Wikipedia has done with it, if it's whitewashed it or not, but this was covered up for years and years, and Tommy Robinson was a main figure in pointing the finger at this. It's absolutely disgusting when you look into it.
That the public ascribed this to the government's immigration policies, its integration policies, but the government can't take responsibility for that because they've made that mistake now. The Conservative government that just left power, that said that they would bring migration down to the tens of thousands a year, left office with a net migration of legal migration at almost 750,000 a year. which is, by the way, completely unsustainable, but they just keep doing it anyway. The interesting thing that Tommy Robinson speaks to.
Yeah, but why do they keep doing it? Nobody seems to have an answer to this question. Why? Why on earth would any Western European country or one of the English-speaking countries in the world, one of the developed countries, what possible benefit could mass migration from the third world be to any of those countries? None of our Western countries need a single person from the third world. Not that there's no good people in third world countries, don't get me wrong, but if there are, we don't need them. We have enough good people. Their countries need their good people to stay there and build them up.
And has always spoken to is, what are you allowed to do about this or say about this? Now, if you're me, for the time being, you're allowed to write about it sometimes. You're allowed to speak about it sometimes. You're allowed to raise alarms sometimes. You're allowed to speak your mind somewhat. But if you're a Tommy Robinson character, if you grow up in Luton and you haven't had many advantages in life and you've had quite a lot of disadvantages, and you're white and working class, what are you allowed to do about this? What are you allowed to say about any of this? And the government, for decades now, has had the attitude, you're not allowed to do anything. You're not allowed to say anything. You can't do anything, because if you do, we'll call you a racist and we'll call you far right. And this...
I think a lot of people, more and more people these days, don't really care anymore. You can call me a racist, you can call me far right, you can call me misogynist, you can call me all these names. I just don't care. Let me know if you care in the comments.
This has all gone on for a very long time.
Well, it's an effective epithet, like when I first came across your work, and
it's only an effective epithet if you care. You should just laugh it off. If somebody calls you one of those things, just laugh it off. Say, yeah, I am guilty as charged. So what?
I've seen this reaction in the depths of my soul to many people. When I first came across your work, which is quite a long time ago now, I was leery of it. And I think the reason for that is that it's something like this, is that there are a lot of people in the world, and I'm not going to be able to meet all of them or read all of them or have anything to do with all of them. And now and then some of them get tarred with some epithet. Well, the cost to me of accepting that tarring is very low on average, because if I don't pay attention to some person, there's a whole bunch of other people I could pay attention to. So it's not like the pool of people to attend to shrinks, right? And that epithet of far right is a very effective brand of tarring. And it's even effective among people who are very skeptical of such things. So I'll give you an example. So I talked to Michael Schellenberger after he released the W-Path files, when he was investigating the absolute pathological corruption and craven cowardice of the cadre who presented what purport to be the standard guidelines for enlightened care to the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Psychological Association. And he was appalled at their lack of competence and their ideological possession. It was another bottomless pit. And I asked him how he became aware of this, and he said, well, one way was that he had listened to Abigail Schreier and I talk about it. I guess it was 2 years ago when Abigail first put out her book, Irreversible Damage. It was the first podcast I did after I'd been so ill, and I was terrified to do it because it was such a hot topic. And, Schellenberger himself said he listened to that podcast, but he really couldn't believe it. And that's another example of the effectiveness of that tarring.
Yes.
It's so easy to demolish someone's reputation.
And it's especially easy to demolish a reputation for people who do not have, as it were, a backlog of published work.
Yeah, right,
I mean,
exactly.
it's relatively easzy, but to weigh up someone's views and make an estimation of them if they have 7 books to their name, as I do, or thousands and thousands of articles. But it can't be the case that only book authors are allowed to say anything about the disintegration of their societies.
No. Of course, it shouldn't be only authors of books who are allowed to say anything about the disintegration of their societies. Everybody, all of us, should be saying things about the disintegration of our societies. We should be screaming about the disintegration of our societies and holding politicians to account and voting them out and demanding that they take action to reverse these trends, which can be reversed. It will take some effort, yes, but it can be done. So let me know what you think in the comments, because this is a serious issue. And in the meantime, while you're making a comment, do hit the subscribe button and the like button. It really helps me grow the channel and continue making content for you.